What is up, everybody? So today for class, we are going to get into Adobe Illustrator. So this will be a tutorial similar to what we did last week or 2 weeks ago for Photoshop. And I prepared a little tutorial here for you guys just to get you into Illustrator and kind of show you some of the basics of how it works. And we're going to create our own little design here. Okay, so what I have planned for you guys is we are actually gonna have a fun time here rebranding one of the I wouldn't say it's underrated because I only drink Diet Mountain Dew, so it's not really one of my favorites, but the branding on it is certainly one of the worst of all sodas in my opinion, and that's Mr. Pibb. So maybe some of you know Mr. Pibb, maybe you like it, maybe you don't. But what we are going to do today is we are going to rebrand the packaging and sort of the logo and stuff for Mr. Pibb. So let's go ahead and we're going to get started here. You should download all of the files from the link from Canvas, and here's where they should look like, minus you won't have the test folder. You can see here is some pictures of old Mr. Pibbs, and now what they call Pibb Extra. But in our rebrand, we're going to go back and we're going to mesh the two. We're going to actually have Mr. Pibb Extra because that's what we want to do. So let's get started. Go ahead and open up your Illustrator, and you're going to want to hit Create New. So you're going to set a width of 3 inches and a height of 4.1 for this. That'll work pretty good for like a can size. And so go ahead, and once you have that, make sure you're set to inches. Go ahead and hit Create. And in here we have our artboard. So one of the first things that I like to do is go ahead and we're going to go in here and take and if you click Control, you can highlight just the ones you want and drag them into your Illustrator file here. And we don't really need these for anything except for reference and maybe to pull some colors from them. If we want to keep some of the colors. Okay, so there we'll have those there for reference if we need them in our file, so we can quick look at them. Alright, so my idea for a rebrand for this problem, for this brand here, is as you can see, when it used to be Mr. Pibb, they had this goofy little dude on their packaging, and I guess he was kind of like their mascot, I guess, so to speak, except for he's just kind of this weird goofy looking drawing, and so they kind of did away with them and they went with the name Pibb Extra, which I think is good to get away from him because I think he's weird. But I think what we could do is let's bring him back, and we're going to have him as part of our packaging, except he's not going to look anything like that. We're going to rebrand who Mr. Pibb is. And so when I think of Mr. Pibb, the word Pibb, one syllable, makes me think of James Bond, right? Like Bond, James Bond, Pibb, Mr. Pibb. So we are going to bring Mr. Pibb back, but he's going to be like a super secret spy, man of mystery type figure on our packaging, and we're going to just kind of go with that theme, which I think marketing wise it might be a little goofy, but I like the idea of if it is going to be on your packaging, let's make him something that is cool, something that people would want to aspire to or be like, because that's kind of the idea behind marketing, right? As silly as it is, we know that we can't be those things, but the psychology still works, right? So if the mascot is something that's cool and something people will aspire to, they will associate that with your brand, and your brand will sort of take on that personification. Good example of that, of course, from a number of years ago is the Marlboro Man. And if you don't know who Marlboro Man is, that's good because it means you're not a smoker. But Marlboro cigarettes, they had an iconic mascot, and it was a cowboy, and so they just portrayed this image of smoking as being, really rough and rugged and kind of like what men do. And of course all that is totally fake, but the marketing side of it worked really well, too well in fact, and probably caused a lot of people to get cancer. But we're going to use our powers for good here. So to kind of create our spy theme, I am going to put an image of this spy guy and kind of do like our classic James Bond looking down the gun barrel swirly gig thing. So that's the first thing we're going to make. So go ahead, open up your file here, and let's give you a quick kind of rundown. You'll notice that the layout looks probably really similar to Photoshop, but you have a whole different set of tools. It's a whole different style of drawing, and in fact, I'll tell you this up front. I think for me it was really helpful to start to not think so much in terms of drawing, that we're going to be drawing stuff, but really think more in terms of that we're going to be building or constructing our design, because you will draw, but there's a lot of tools involved, and sometimes the quickest way to make something isn't to just try to draw it out because we want to be real precise. And sometimes, you'll use a bunch of different tools and a bunch of different layers and things like that. And so you'll come to find that really it's a lot more like you're creating stuff, you're building it, you're constructing it digitally in this program. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to go over to the left and we're going to click our shape tool. So this over here is our shape tool. We'll call it the ellipse tool. But as you can see, if you click on it and hold down, it makes this more than ellipses. You can do rectangles, round rectangles, polygons. But what we're going to do right now is create an ellipse. And if you hold shift and you click and you drag, you will see that we will create a perfect circle. So this circle is going to be the center of the gun barrel where we're going to place our little guy, Mr. Pibb, as we'll call him. So we want to let's go ahead, we'll center this. So if you go up to the top of the page, you'll see you should have some aligning tools. So if you click and hold down, you should have a drop down box here, and you have some options. So align to selection or align to artboard. So what we want to click in this, make sure we have clicked in this scenario, is align to artboard, and that is going to align everything in regards to where it is in the artboard. So even if we have it slightly off centered here, if we click this horizontal line, it's going to bring it right back center. This one over here would bring us down, and so we would know we're centered horizontally and vertically, but we don't want this centered vertically. We're going to put our name down here, and we're going to kind of have our image up here. So now let's see. We're going to draw our circle here. Let's go up and let's turn this a gray color so we can see it. And so up here, this is the property, some of our properties of the shape that we have selected. So this would be our fill color, and this would be our stroke color. And as you can see, that makes sense. Tracks over here, right? We have a gray circle with a black outline, or stroke as we call it. And here are some more things to adjust the stroke. Your main one, of course, being how thick your stroke is. So right now it is at 1 point, so you can click up and you see that gets thicker as we go down. Also, you can click here and you can select from the list if you want. You can go a little smaller than 1 point. You could even do 0.5 if you wanted it to have a real fine edge on it. Remember, Control plus and Control minus will zoom you in and out. I will probably be doing that a lot, so I probably will forget to mention how I'm zooming in or out, so that is how we do it. Same as Photoshop, Control plus, Control minus. That's the fastest way. There's a more complicated way, but I suggest getting used to doing it that way. So for this, we are going to set our stroke, and we're going to click that red line, which means none. We don't want a stroke on this. So we have our circle. So now that we have our circle drawn here, we are going to click on it. Make sure it is selected. You should have these bounding boxes around it. Hit Control C. That is to copy it. Of course, you can always right click and do it the old-fashioned way. Oh, sorry, no, it's not a right click. You could go up to Edit and do copy, but just get used to doing these shortcuts for copy. So one thing that's interesting or different about Illustrator is you'll see here, if I click it and I hit Control C for copy and I hit Control V for paste, well, that works, and I've pasted it right here. But Illustrator has a nifty little shortcut, because a lot of times, and you'll find in Illustrator when you everything is in layers, and same as Photoshop, but so everything it's in order. So if you copy something and then you paste it, now if we go change that color and we'll say it's blue, you can see that I've pasted that on top of, and that's kind of the default. But it's also not in line. So sometimes, many times, it's very useful in Illustrator because of the constructing aspect of things. If we can paste something directly in front of or directly behind, but in the same spot as what we have. So if we have this and we hit Control Copy and we hit Control F, that's going to copy it right on top of itself, but it'll be in front. And you can see now if you go blue, we've changed this to blue, and if you click and you drag down, you see we have the original behind it, and we have the new copy in front of it. So you can hit Control Z and get that back to where it was before. Similarly, if you delete that, let's copy our circle again. It should still be copied, but go ahead and hit Control C to copy, and you hit Control B as in boy. That will copy it directly behind that object. So if you go up here and you change the color to blue, you will see nothing happens. So it appears because we had selected the copy that was behind. So you see that our circle is there. So I'm going to hit Control Z and hit Control Z again so that we're back to just our one. Whoops, see, look, we already messed up. We had an extra one. So now we should just be back. We want to have just our one circle. So let's go ahead, hit Control Copy, Control B, and we will make this circle behind our current circle. And let's go up, and it doesn't really matter at this point what color we want to change it to, just need it to be different. So we're going to choose a darker gray. If you click the corner and hold Shift in Illustrator, you must hold Shift to make sure that this will scale proportionally. In Photoshop, you'll remember that is the default, and things scale proportionally in Photoshop. But in Illustrator, the default is if you click and drag. And that's because you're drawing a lot more shapes. Sometimes you might want this shape. So if you want to scale things proportionally, just remember to hold Shift and click and drag. So we're going to want to make a big circle here, pretty big. And what we're going to do is click on this circle and click on our little circle. And up here where we were at before in this align, make sure we're on align to selection, and then holding down the Alt button, and you should get that double arrow, click on your little circle, and you'll see you get a thicker kind of blue border around it. That's letting you know. So now you'll see what you've done up here is actually you've aligned to a key object. So we're saying we want to align these things, but we don't want this little one to move. We want it to stay where it is, and we want to move everything else to align with it. So we want to do that, and we're going to go ahead and align vertically here. And you want your circle your big circle just needs to be big enough that it comes off the page at the bottom here, and that will make sense to you later. Probably not right now, but just trust me, you want the circle big enough to go down there. So our circle's pretty big here, so we're going to go up and click on our direct select tool, which is the white arrow. It's the second from the top. So what this enables us to do is to go in, and I showed you a couple classes ago how things work in Illustrator, and you have these nodes or these points that you can edit, and this is how vector drawing works. And you'll see if I click on them here that we have a point and we have these lines which indicate well, they control the curve, the Bezier curve, right? And so we can see, you know, if we click on the handle and manipulate them, well, we can change our shape if we want to. We're not doing that right at the moment. We're just going to click on this top point here, and we want to turn this into a half circle. So with just this one top point selected, and you'll see that it's selected because it is blue, and all of the other little points are white. So you know you have just that one selected. Just go ahead and hit delete, and we've created a half circle. So this is kind of goes with what I'm telling you about how we construct things in Illustrator rather than just drawing, because we could draw a half circle with these, you know, with our pen tool, which is this one here. As you see, you know, we could try to draw a half circle where we have a point and we draw it straight down, and we have another point over here, and we have another point over here, and then we connect. And as you can see, that's not even perfect, and we're not even done. We would have to go in and do a number of different things to get it to look right. So much quicker workaround or way it's good to start thinking about is, if you need a half circle, well, let's draw a circle and then we can cut it in half by decreasing that point. There's, again, like Photoshop, sometimes there's a number of different ways you can do things, and if you watch tutorials online, you will find designers do things differently. This is a nice, quick, easy way to get a half circle. There's a lot of other little things like that we'll learn along the way. So now what's kind of interesting, you can see we have this blue line around the edge, but our dividing line here is not, because this shape is not closed. Now we've just deleted one of those points, and so this is an open shape. It doesn't really matter, but it just bugs me, and it could sometimes make a difference because of how an open shape will act versus a non-open shape. But let's go ahead and select those 2 points on either side of the straight edge, and go up here, and you'll see these little tools. Click this one that says connect selected endpoints, and you'll see that will connect that, and that'll give us a nice closed shape, which is just a little bit easier to work with. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we are going to take and make sure we have our big half circle selected, and we are going to use our rotate tool. Our rotate tool is over here on the left. It is a circle with the arrow. If you highlight it, it should say rotate tool. So go ahead and select that. And what we're going to do, if you see this little crosshair down here, this light blue crosshair, that is the point with which our object would rotate around. And by default, most objects will rotate around whatever Illustrator decides would be closest to the center of that shape. So by default, it's right here in the center. But what we want to do is we want to go over here, and we want to select the center of this circle. And sometimes you can't get it exact, and if it's not, that's probably fine. We just kind of need to get close. But before you click, you need to hold down the Alt button, and you should see 3 or 4 little dots right next to your crosshair up there, and that's how you know you're in the right section. So holding that Alt, you click on that spot, and you can see it rotated for us here. And we are going to do a rotation of minus 40 degrees. So make sure you put in the minus 40 degrees, and that will get us rotating the right direction here. You have this preview button, which is going to show you how far it's tilted. So if you deselect it, you will see your original shape. If you select it, you will see that is what we are going to do to our shape. Now, in this instance, we don't want to hit OK, because OK will just rotate our shape. But what we actually want to do is make a copy of this shape that is rotated 40 degrees. So we are going to hit the copy button. So now you see we have like our two little, like, looks like orange slices here. And so let's select both of those. And as you can see, this new one, of course, is on top of the old one, as we said, by default. And now what we're going to do is use our Pathfinder tool. So I have my Pathfinder tool shortcutted over here and I highly recommend that you do that. And where you will find this is if you go up here to Windows, and down here you will find a bunch of different options. So just like Photoshop, you can customize your artboard and your setup to get it exactly the way you want. So whatever you're working on or whatever you use a lot, I highly recommend pulling them somewhere where you can get to them real quick. I use Pathfinder constantly. Another tool I have is these selection tools over here. We'll get to those later. I think that's the properties. So yeah, Pathfinder. If you don't have it over here, go down and click on your Pathfinder, and you'll see mine has popped out over there. But you have your layers. Oh, that is your Pathfinder. Okay, so sorry, I was pointing at the wrong one earlier. This is your layers panel, but down here is what we have as our Pathfinder. And right here, the two boxes that are kind of on top of each other, those are our actual Pathfinder tool. So if you click on that, it's going to give us this little box right here. So what the Pathfinder tool is going to do is let you do a number of different things, and they do a pretty good job of illustrating what they would do. So if you run your cursor over, you can read along with me. But so that first one there, two solid blocks unite. So what that's going to do, if you select two different shapes and you click on this button, you will make those two shapes into one shape. And if you go and click on your selector, you'll see that's all one shape now. We don't want to do that, so hit Control Z. What we want to do is this second one, which is it's called minus the front. So with whatever is on top, and you will select whatever is below, and when you click that, you'll see it'll cut away all the stuff that was behind it. And that, in this instance, is what we want to do. There are some other tools here. I highly encourage you to play around with them. So intersect is going to delete everything except for where the two shapes intersect, overlap, what they have in common. And the other one there is opposite exclude. So it'll cut out any areas that overlap, and you will be just left with the rest. And these other tools down here, trim, divide, they kind of work differently. I don't use those ones nearly as much, but it's good to play around with them and just kind of see what they can do. For now, we're going to get back onto this. So we have our new shape here. And as you can see, if we're making this swirl, this is kind of a good start, right? We're starting to see a little bit of a swirl of that gun barrel kind of a look there. So what we need is more of these, right? So let's select this. We are going to go and select our rotate tool once again. You click on that. We're going to bring your cursor over, and now you should have this little node here, so you should be in the same spot. Holding Alt again, click that spot. This time change our angle to -45 degrees, and remember to hit copy. Now you could repeat this whole process again and again, but there is luckily a shortcut so that we don't have to do that. If you go up here to I thought it was an effect. Oh yeah, okay. So You know what? Oh, okay, that's where it is. See, just get used to doing the shortcut because it's so much easier. But just so that you know where it is, and with this shape selected, if you were to go up to Object and then go to Transform, because that's what we're doing, we're transforming this object. I had trouble finding it here. And you go to Transform again. Whatever transformation that you just did, so that can include moving it, rotating it, reflecting it, scaling it, shearing it, any of these things. If you hit transform again, and as you can see here, Illustrator is really good, and so is Photoshop, and about showing you when there are shortcuts, they will show you what they are. So this one is Control D. So we've just rotated this the way we want, but we want to do it a few more times. So just go ahead, select it, make sure it's highlighted, hit Control D, and go all the way around the circle, and there you go. We have our nice little swirl effect there. So that's a good start, and you will notice, kind of like we have in Photoshop, you do have this ability to do layers. Excuse me. But we don't do everything in layers. Usually in Illustrator we're drawing a lot of different things. So usually what I like to do is, if I have different parts, main parts of a design, I will put them into a layer, just because when you start doing a big design and you have a lot of objects, it can get kind of hard to select the objects that you want to transform. As you can see, if we had something that was behind all of these little swirls, we would have to zoom in real close, and we would have to select from there. And actually, that is kind of what our next step is going to be. And what we are going to do is we are going to open up our layers panel. So over here on your right, it's the two little diamonds stacked on top of each other. And if you don't have it, again, if there's something anything that I tell you to go do and you don't have it over there, might mean that it's not a default, but you can find any of those things in this window section. This one happens to be called layers. So if you click layers, it'll pop up. It might just pop up the little box for you, and if that's the case and you want it over here, what you can do is grab a box and you can put it over there. I don't want that, so I can put it back here. I can hit the X. But if you want something on your menu, all you have to do is just drag and drop, and then it'll stay there, and your settings will keep it there. So it's really nice in that regard. So let's go to our layer. We're going to start a new layer. Then we're going to click and drag it. We want this layer to be behind, so we'll call this our background layer. And what we're going to do here is just go ahead, and if you click over here, next to the eyeball, you will see we have a lock, and that means that if a layer is locked, you cannot edit anything on that layer. So if I go in and click, you'll see I cannot click any of these things that I just drew, and that's because that layer is locked. So if that ever happens and you're trying to click something and you can't, the first thing you should do, go check your layers and make sure the layer is not locked. But what we're going to do is create a background. So let's go over here to our shape tool. We're going to get a rectangle tool, and let's just draw a rectangle. Let's go ahead and zoom in so we can make sure we get it. We'll draw a rectangle that is the same size as our artboard here. And let's see. Boom, boom. So another thing that is happening here, you should have the ability to enable snapping. So you'll see, as I was resizing this, you'll get these little purple lines, and you'll notice too when you're doing it, it'll want to it's like a magnet, like it just is drawn to this line, and that's called snapping. And it's a really nice tool because it makes drawing things like this, when we're trying to get it exactly the same size as the box, much easier than having to zoom in and making sure that it's exactly right. But then there's other times when it can be annoying because you want to draw this shape, but it's right next to something else, and so it keeps snapping to that thing. So it's good to know how to turn that on and off. I actually even remember where that is located. The snapping, I think up here, this little icon tool, and the drop down arrow there. So it gives you your pixel snapping options. And you can kind of look into those. The defaults are usually pretty good. Line selected art to pixel grid. I actually would deselect that. We don't really want it to align things to pixel grid. That makes it annoying when you try to move things and they move too far. But anyways, Control U is the shortcut for that. So if you want the snapping on, you can hit Control U to turn it on, and you will see all those nice, see it's off right now for me, and if I hit Control U, you'll see those lines appear, and it's wanting to snap to these different objects, so snap it to the right ones. So let's go ahead and get on with our next part we're going to do here. So we have our background layer. Let's go ahead and make that, for now, let's just make it a light color, like a light gray, probably the same as that circle in there. Next thing we're going to do here is, as you can see, we have this nice cool swirl, but it's kind of distracting. It's bigger than our whole artboard. So let's go ahead and get our draw tool again, and we're going to draw our shape tool. Draw another rectangle the same size as the box, and this time make sure you're on the layer with the swirls, and it's going to be above that. So if you, with that box selected, and you go in, I missed a step here, I apologize. First thing we want to do is, if you click anywhere where you're not on a shape, you'll start to draw a box, and anything that box touches will be selected as long as it's in a layer that's not locked. So right now our background layer is locked. I didn't know if I told you to do that, but go ahead and lock your background layer for now so we don't accidentally select it. But we're going to draw a box and we have to have our selection tool, so that's that black arrow. If you draw a box with the shape tool, you'll just draw a shape. But if you have a selection tool and you draw a box, you are going to select anything that box touches. So even if you just barely touch it, you see there, you're going to select it. But we're going to select all of these swirly things, and then holding down the shift button, click on the circle in the middle, excuse me, because we do not want to select that circle. We just want these little swirlies right now. So with all of those selected, we are going to make those a compound path. Now what a compound path is we have all these shapes, and it might look like they're touching, but they're really not. They're really, really close together. But anytime you have shapes that are not touching and you want to make them all into one shape, that's called a compound path. And there's the long way of doing that is you can go down to Object, and then you can go down to Path, and or go to see, I don't even know where these things are. You got to learn there's compound path, and hit Make. But it's much easier. Again, it's something. If you're working in Illustrator, you get used to it. You're gonna need this shortcut a lot. But Control 8 is that shortcut. So highlight those things again. Hold Shift so that you click on your center circle so you don't have that selected. Hold down Control and hit 8, and it looks like nothing happened, but trust me, something happened. You made that a compound path, which will help us later. Actually, let's go ahead and just do that now. So click on your center circle here. Go ahead and on your layers panel to the right, create another new layer, and we'll call this layer dude. We're going to put our dude in this layer. So select that center circle, hit Control Copy, go up and make sure you're selected on the dude layer, and hit Control F to paste that directly in front. Now that did not seem to work, and you can tell because the bounding boxes are all blue, and you see this little color by this layer is blue. So everything in this layer has the blue things around it when it's highlighted. So this did not make it to the layer that we wanted it to. We could try that again. So hit Control Copy and then select that layer and hit Control F. It did it again. So the way we can get around this is we can go select this layer, have it highlighted, right click on our shape, go down to Arrange and say Send to Current Layer. And now you can see that circle has now turned to green, so we know that it is in the correct layer. So we're just going to need this circle later on when we start working on that layer. So right now we don't need it, so let's just hit our eye on that layer, which will just make that layer disappear so we can't see it. Now take our center circle that's on our, we'll call it the swirl layer. So select it and also select our swirly things here. Go back down to our Pathfinder and we're going to once again use our minus front button. And now it looks like nothing happened, and that's just because our background, remember, background layer is the same color. So now what we've done is we've cut a hole in the center of these, so we have our nice swirly gumdrops here. So because those are distracting, I think we already drew the box, didn't we? No, we didn't. So go ahead and click your square. We're going to draw another box that is the same size as our artboard. Because we used that tool, you can see now these little shapes are, if you click them, they're all still grouped together, but they're no longer a compound path because we undid that when we used our minus front tool on them. So if we click them, they're all still in one group. But if we hit Control 8 once again, we'll see that sorry about my phone. We will see that they are once again a compound path. Now, if we select our box and we select all of our shapes here, another shortcut. If you go up here to Object. We're going to do clipping mask. You might recognize that. You do clipping mask in Photoshop as well. And so what that's going to do is, if we hit make there, it'll make our swirls only appear. But when we highlight it, we can see our shapes are still there. So we haven't deleted these other parts. In case we need to move this around if it's not in the right spot, we can do that. So this is a non-destructive way of kind of cropping off parts that you don't want to see. And once again, this is something you use a lot. The shortcut for this is Control 7, and I highly recommend getting used to using that as well. So we're looking good now. We kind of have our little swirl. We have our background. Let's go ahead and get on with our next part, which is the dude. So if you go to our files, so go back to your layer selection, make sure that the dude layer is visible. Go ahead and lock those other layers so we don't have to mess with them. Go to where you have downloaded the tutorial files and get this picture of this real handsome guy here, and we're going to click and drag that in to our Illustrator file. So he's pretty big, so you might have to go and resize him a little bit. Hold Shift and resize him down to a more manageable size. So for this illustration, we are, looks like when I drug him in, I drug him into a new file. I'm not sure how that happened. So hit Control Copy. It's not a big deal if that happened to you. Control V. Well, okay, so it didn't like that. Make sure we have our visible layer selected. Control V, and we've brought them into here. I'm going to close that. It's weird. That doesn't normally happen like that, but it happened this time. So, okay, so for this illustration, what we're going to do is we're going to have a really simplified, a really minimalistic sort of a design. So this is our mascot. This is going to be Mr. Pibb, this handsome fella right here. But we're not going to have a lot of details such as his face. We're going to have a very basic outline of just his jacket, his shirt, his tie, and his head. And so the first step is, let's go over here and grab your pen tool. And we're going to zoom in on this guy. And what we're going to do is just go around and quickly trace a very basic outline of him. We don't have to go into a ton of detail, so don't worry about getting every little hair and everything. We just want a basic outline. So if you remember when you watched me do that, or watched me do the example of Illustrator a couple of classes ago, this is your pen tool. When you click on your pen tool, you're going to make a point, and you can see you have this line, and if you click over here, you're drawing a line. Now if you click and you drag, you're going to make a curved line, and you can see, like, the farther you drag, and then if you start doing real crazy stuff, you can do that, make some really interesting shapes, and then when you bring it back to your start, you can even have this real weird shape like that. It's kind of hard to see. Do a different color. That's how that pen tool works. So select it, and what we're going to do is just trace an outline of this guy. We're going to trace his whole outline. Like I said, don't have to go into a lot of detail. I like to start at a point that is not a curve. It's just a little easier that way. So I'm going to start right here by his ear. Now this is where my clipping is kind of, or my not my clipping, my snapping is kind of getting annoying. See how it's really jittery because it's trying to snap to different things. So I'm going to hit Control U, I'm going to hit Control Z and undo that. So if I hit Control Z and I turn my snapping off, also this is a rather small photo, so the smaller it is, the more trouble you're going to have with that snapping. So I think what I'm going to actually do here is delete what I've started to do. I'm going to go ahead and make this guy a little bit bigger, and it might make it a little bit easier for me to trace, rather than, we'll zoom in also, but it's a little easier that way. So get our pen tool, go ahead and start tracing around this guy. Get his ear, go up in his hair. So I'm going to do this quickly here, as quick as I can, and you work it on it in your area, or in your file. And as you can see, a good strategy for making these shapes is anytime you have kind of like an arch, if you do a curved arch, so click and drag on the tall part of the arch, and down at the bottom you can maybe do a straight one. So we have curved points and we have straight points. So and we want it to be close, but we don't, like I said, don't worry if it's not exactly perfect. It's not going to matter too much for this. For our purposes, because like I said, we're going to make it's going to be very sort of minimalistic design. So a lot of these details will not matter if they are there or not. And also, once you have your shape completed, you can also, if there's something you don't like, go back with your direct selection tool, that white arrow, and you can kind of fix anything that doesn't look right to you. Getting close to getting his head here. And so we're going to outline his whole body, and then we're going to cut away or go ahead and draw on top of that sort of our white parts, like for his shirt. And when you get to the bottom, you can hold shift to draw a line straight over. That's a nice shortcut as well. If you ever need to draw a straight line, holding shift will draw it nice and straight, usually straight across or at a 45-degree angle. So we're getting kind of close here. Inside and outside. And just kind of following those curves so we get a real natural looking image at the end for us to be able to use. But like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes you want it to be perfect depending on what your project is, but for this our purposes here, it will be. So another little trick here, you can't see, you can actually go, what I'd like to do is, if I had been paying attention before, you could make this layer opaque, or change the opacity so you could see through it. That would have been smart, but what I sometimes do is kind of do trial by error with my Control Z button, because I'm always hovering on Control Z. So I might go click over here, see where my next spot should go, hit Control Z, click and drag. Otherwise you can just go, you can kind of guess, and then you can come back and change it later. You almost always have to do that anyways. So somewhere in here, okay, we're getting real close. Oh, I accidentally moved it down. Again, you can hold spacebar and click and drag even while you're doing this outlining. It's a really nice tool, so you can be zoomed in, and you'll see you change to the hand when you hit your spacebar, and that will allow you to move up to the spots. I've been doing that, and I didn't tell you, but that's how that is done. Okay, so we've got him outlined. Let's turn our opacity down on him. Let's go in and fix these little spots that we couldn't see, so we kind of got them messed up here at the end. So if you click on the center, not the handles, but the actual node itself, then you can select those handles and you can drag them to where you want. Where they look good. Now you can see we kind of, it's like we're missing one here. That's okay. We can go up on our pen tool. If you click and drag, you have add anchor point, the little plus sign. So go ahead, add an anchor point there and click it. It usually will add an anchor point. Remember, we have the two types. They have the curbs and then we have the corners. So we want a corner in this case because this is a sharp little area here, and we can adjust. Oh, so if you click on your shape, click on your node, we can adjust the handles the way we want. And in this case, we have two corners, and so it doesn't show us that handle. But if you click on the line between the two and you click and drag, oh, I say that, make sure only one is selected, but oh, it's not wanting to work. Okay. That's fine, it's good enough. Okay, so here we have our little guy, our basic outline. He is going to be a dark color, and we are going to have his shirt be white, and then we're going to try to tie in with the Mr. Pibb packaging, and we're going to go, since he's a man of mystery, we're going to go with a nice dark color scheme, dark colors, but we're going to use this nice maroon color in here to accent things, and I thought we would make his tie that nice dark maroon color of the original Mr. Pibb. So what we need to do is now go in and draw our tie and also draw our white shapes here. So let's grab our pen tool again, which is now our add anchor point tool, but go back and select our pen. And now since we've made that layer so we can see it, we're going to go in and just draw on all of our white areas now. And Again, just try to get it close. And so what we're going to do here is, remember, we have layers. So don't have to worry about going around the tie, because we're going to do the tie in a different layer. So just basically cutting the hole, this open hole that is created by his jacket, so we can see his white shirt underneath. And it's going to come up here. And basically, see, we've kind of lost it. But again, we'll go back and we'll fix that in just a second here. And it looks like I'm way off, but that's all right. So let's go ahead, let's change this color to, let's just do white so we can see it against there. Go to our opacity and move it down just so we can see what we're working with here. Grab our direct select tool. If you need to, zoom in. Just get this where it's kind of close, so we'll move that down over here. We'll move that there. Looks like that was a little closer, something along the, oh, see, now that happens if you grab the handle on accident, which does happen. So hand on Control Z, everybody. That is my advice to you. And we'll just change that here. Nice. That looks like that might be slightly off a little bit from what we want. And that happened because I clicked on the whole shape. So you got to be careful and make sure you actually have that handle or the node that you're wanting to use selected. So that looks pretty good. I'll move that just a tad. That should be good. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is to just draw over our tie here. Or actually, and sometimes it's okay, you can kind of, when things are opaque, you kind of can't, or your opacity is down, you cannot really tell what you're doing. So if you turn those up, and he's going to be a dark color, so let's go ahead and make him gray. We can kind of see, we're not quite done, are we? Because we need his tie, but we can't really see his collar. So we have to draw some shapes here to represent the folds of his collar so we can see those. And so what we're going to do is just get zoomed in here. And remember, anywhere you touch, we're going to draw another, it's going to be the same color as his jacket, even though it's a shadow. So go ahead, anything that once it gets over to this black part, we don't really have to worry about it. So we're going to click here, start, and we're just going to have a nice little outline of his collar. And all right, and then what we're going to actually do is draw sort of this shadowy shape, and we just are going to kind of approximate, and it's going to come down here along his tie, and just this real dark area is what we're going for. And here it starts to curve back up. And I know it's white because the last thing we selected was white. I know that it gets confusing, so go ahead, turn that our dark gray color so we can know that it's going to be the shadow, and we're going to draw the same sort of shadow over here. Let's start here and just trace the line of his collar till we get into our black area. Go ahead and just drag down, and we're going to just make a nice fine line so that we can see where the edge of his collar is. And then the last thing we're going to do is draw his tie. So go ahead, same deal. Pick a spot and go ahead and trace the outline of his tie. Don't worry about all the little details of it. We're just going to leave it one color because we're going for a real minimalist look, so we're not too worried about having a lot of detail. And I'll show you a little trick here so we don't have to be so precise. We can just kind of trace that tie back up. And around, and that should be pretty good. So let's go ahead and we'll just make, if you click on it with your select tool, I moved it a little there. So let's go ahead and make it red so we can see what we're working with. And now if we go and select all of our layers that we just drew here, and we go and set our opacity 100, if you select all of them and just type in 100 in opacity, they will all come back. So if we click our picture, drag it over there, we can kind of see that's pretty good. We have a nice sort of minimalistic looking James Bond type figure here, right? Actually this tie looks pretty good. We kind of have some of these white areas that don't really seem to fit, and that's okay. What we can just do is go in and make our tie go sort of on top of those layers. So we got to select the right area selected. All right, select that node. That's what I'm trying to do. As you can see, even if you've done this for many years, it can still come across things that will frustrate you and not work the way that you think they should from time to time. So just remember to try to have fun with it and don't get too upset, and you will find the answer. Okay, so that looks better. We don't have some of those white areas. We've overlapped down there, but that's fine because you can't really tell the difference. That's going to work really nice. So what we want to do, let's go ahead, select that tie, and we're going to pull a color. So what we're going to use is our eyedropper tool. You can see it. It looks like a little eyedropper. It's eyedropper tool. So go select a real dark part of like a dark maroon, because we want a nice dark color from the can. And you can see it's nice. I like that. Nice dark maroon color. So go use our select tool again. Draw that box, and we're going to hit Control G, G as in girl, to just select all of that and group it together. So if it's all select, now you can see if we select just one part of it, we select all of it, they're all still their own separate areas, but they're grouped together. And to ungroup them, you can hit Control Shift G. Nope. Yeah, Control Shift G will undo your group. So you can Control G to group, Control Shift G to ungroup if something is grouped together. Okay, so now this is looking pretty good. We have our mascot, Mr. Pibb, the secret super agent spy, and we're going to place him in our circle here. And we're starting to look pretty good as far as these things go. So hold Shift and let's resize him to a point that we like. Let's see, we don't really need all of him. We just kind of need his upper half and his tie. So get him to a shape that you think looks pretty good. Put him in here. Okay, so now what we're going to do again is, this is why we saved that circle from before. Click your circle. If you hit Control and you hit your brackets, if you're holding Control and you hit your left bracket and your right bracket, that will take the object you have selected, it will move it up in the layers. You can see that reflected if you hit these little arrows on your layer panel. You can see every object that is in the different layers. And you can see as you build this, you could have quite a few different objects. So sometimes it's hard to know exactly where it falls, because you could have sometimes hundreds of different layers, because every shape you draw will be on its own sublayer in this layer group. But hitting Control and hitting the brackets will move an object up and down in the sublayers. And another great shortcut is Control Shift bracket. The right bracket will bring something all the way to the top. Now it'll only bring it to the top of the main layer, but it will bring it to the top of all the different sublayers in that layer. So if I were to go down and select my background and I hit Control Shift bracket to bring it all the way to the top, you can see it doesn't cover anything in the layers that's above it, because it'll only take it to the top of all the sublayers, which it is the only thing, that rectangle is the only thing in that layer at the moment. So let's lock those back up. So once we have that guy where we want him, let's we brought our circle up to the top. Let's select him and select circle and hit Control 7, and we're going to make another clipping mask. And now that I see that, I don't really like where he's at. So if you click on our clipping mask, up here in the corner, you have a clip. You'll see it says Clip Group. So that's how you know you have a clipping mask. This will say Edit Your Clipping Path. This says Edit the Contents. So if you click on Edit the Contents, remember I said this is non-destructive, we can still go in, we can move him around inside of his clipping mask. So I think we want to see a little more of his head. We don't want so much of it out of the picture. It seems just like a little bit too much. Maybe move him just a little to the side. I think I like that a little bit better. So that is how you do that. So we have everything kind of in place. So before we start working on our lettering and stuff down here, let's get this looking a little bit more kind of put together. So let's unlock all of our layers here. The first thing we want to do, and now we should just be able to click in an open spot here between our swirls and our guy, and we have our background layer. Let's see, drag it off there. And maybe, yeah, okay. So we want that back. So we want to make this a nice gradient. So, well, like I said, we want some real dark colors. But we also want to tie in these original sort of Mr. Pibb, have some kind of like red maroon type tones. So let's go ahead, if on your right hand side here you should have your gradient tool. Looks the same in Photoshop. Let's click it, and we'll select here what type of gradient we want: linear, radial, and then a freedom, which is kind of lets you just do crazy stuff. We want to just do a radial, which is a circular. So you'll see down here on our gradient, this area on the left that is light. Help you see this a little better. I'm going to hide our swirl layer so you can see what's going on here. Now you can get a real good look at it. So in a radial, it's a circle. So the middle of the circle is light, and towards the out of the circle, edges of the circle, it becomes this dark color. So what we want to do is get this a little bit more towards our color scheme. We want it dark, so we're going to keep that outside black like that, and we're going to turn our swirl black here in a second too. But let's go ahead and grab our dropper tool and just click on the tie there, so we get our nice dark maroon color. Now that kind of looks terrible, so what we're going to do is double click on it again, that circle. Go over here, click your palette, and up in the corner you have some options. So you can play with colors a lot in Illustrator. You can manipulate colors basically any which way that you want. So we're going to click on our HSB, which is our hue, saturation, and blackness setting, because we know we want this color. We just want a little different shade. So if we slide our slider down, we're going to make that less saturated, and if we slide our slider up here on the B, that's going to make it a lighter color. So let's do less saturated. Let's do a lighter color, maybe not quite so light. So basically we're going for, it's gray, but it's just going to have a tint of that red sort of color in there. And I'm going to go ahead and go back and turn our other layer on, just so we can see kind of what we're working with here. So we want to manipulate this. So with you'll see our gradient tools all select over here. If we click, and I think we want the light part right behind his head. So if we click right on his head and we start to drag out, we can see we've adjusted where our gradient is going, and that looks pretty good. We're going to want it to be dark down towards the bottom because we're going to have our wording there. So that looks pretty good, and perhaps we even click this diamond in the middle, and that will adjust further, our scale from it going to the dark color to the light color. You can play with that, and you can see how that affects that and moves it in and out. Move it in a little bit. So that looks pretty good. I'm liking that. Let's unlock our swirl layer. Let's click on our swirl, and let's go ahead up in the left hand corner, click edit contents again, and we're gonna go and click over here on our swatches panel, and let's use this black right here, this sort of register black. That looks pretty good. So if we click outside, and now we can see that our background layer, it kind of bleeds down, and we can't see our little swirls anymore, which I don't exactly like that. I want to see those swirls a little bit, so let's go in and we'll adjust our gradient just a little bit here. And actually, if we want to, we can use our click over here, do our gradient tool, and if we click here, we can drag it out, make it a little bit bigger, and I think I want to do that. Move that up. I still want to see it a little down there. I want it to fade out sort of towards the bottom so it's darker, but that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. I think that looks good. And then lastly, let's go in, and we want him to be the same color as well. So we're selected in here. Let's go up on our swatches panel. Oh, see, now you see we have that whole group selected. So we can either go in and we can ungroup it and select what we want, or if you have a group of objects, you can double click on it. Then, as you see, we click around, we can select the individual objects. It'll isolate this group, and so what we actually need to do is hit Control Z, because we messed up and made it all black. But if we double click in here and we click on it, we highlight our guy, but we double click him again, and now we should have just our dark area selected. And let's go ahead and make him black, and you'll notice that is not exactly what we wanted to do because I missed the shadows, didn't I? So double click on it again. That's a shortcut for a clipping mask. You can go and you can hit edit, or you can just double click and it will let you go in and edit the contents. Let's double click on him again, and let's get these gray areas and make them black, and let's zoom out. And I'm thinking at this point this looks pretty good. It's gonna look like a real nice piece of packaging, but we need some words, don't we? So go ahead and hit your text tool, your type tool. That's a big T. So this works in two ways. You can click and drag a box, and you can make a box, a text box, and your text will work one way. As you can see there, I've just put some gibberish in to demonstrate to you. If you make a text box, now if you have your selection tool and you go and you click and drag your box, you're going to make your text box bigger, but you're not going to affect by clicking and dragging your text. You're just adjusting the size of the box. So the other way to do this, and I'll hit Control Z, is if we use our tool and we just don't draw a box but click one time, and we can see we have our sample text there, lorem ipsum. It's just what it throws in there. Now we can type. Let's type the word, and if you want to use your cap locks, we're going to have it all in capitals. The word PIB, P-I-B-B. That is our That's our guy. This is our Mr. Pibb. Okay, so we have our default font. So what we're going to do is we want a little bit of a thicker font. We want something that's going to match our nice, sleek design here. Also, we can't see it, so if we go up and we're going to make that text white, just so we can work with it here. For now, let's just have it white. And you can see in our text tools up here, you have Myriad Pro is our font, and our font style is regulars. But let's click here. We're going to get a new font. So let's use the font. It's called Azo Sans Black. This is what we're going to use. Now you probably don't have it on your computer, but one of the nice functions about Adobe is with the subscription, you have access to all of the Adobe fonts. So if you click over here and find more, and then type in AZO, and now this is a whole font family. So we have Azo Sans, and you'll see all of these things appear over here. We are looking for Azo Sans Black, which is this one right here. So to get this font, all you need to do is click over here in this little cloud. You'll see the down arrow, and it says activate. Mine says deactivate because it's already activated on mine. But what you want to do is click this little down arrow here, and that's going to activate your font. It might take a couple minutes, especially depending on your internet connection and how fast your computer is, for it to sync. That's what it'll call it. It'll sync the font that you're looking for. So go ahead and do that. And like I said, you might have to wait 5 minutes or so. Sometimes if it doesn't go right away, you can save your Illustrator file, close out, open it back up, and it'll be there. But you'll have to go back over and make sure you're in your fonts. But that is how you activate fonts on Adobe, which is really nice because they have tons and tons of cool fonts that you now have access to for free, and they're super easy. You just go in and you just hit activate. It's great. It's really wonderful. So I highly recommend using those while you guys have the programs. So once you get it activated, Azo Sans Black, it's a nice thick font. You'll see. Let's hold Shift, and now you can see. When we do it that way and we don't draw a text box, but we just click and we just write with our text cursor. Now, when we have our selection tool, we can manipulate this text. So for this instance, it's really nice. It's easier to manipulate, which we're going to do here. So we want it to be a little bit smaller, and we need a little more space between the lettering. So this is something that's really nice. If you're used to working in Microsoft programs, you're very limited in amount of spacing and things that you can do with your lettering. You don't know it yet if you haven't used the Adobe products, but once you use them, it'll be hard to go back because you can get the text and move it to exactly where you want to. You know, sometimes you use Microsoft and 1.5 spacing is too far, but one line spacing is too close, and yeah, you can have all these headaches using Microsoft Word and those types of things. Not so in here. It's very customizable. But to change that, up here at the top, you see this word character. If we click on that, we're going to get a whole new set of tools. If you look at them, a lot of them, the icons are very self-explanatory. You have the letters and you can see what they do, and if you hover over them, it'll also tell you. So this one here says set the tracking for your selected character. So the tracking is the space between the letters. So right now it's set to 0, which is just standard. So you can see if you negative 100, you can move them closer together. If you go and select them over here, you can move them farther apart. We need them a little bit further apart. Yeah, let's just set them at 100 so we have a little bit of room to work with here. That's looking pretty good, so just get that over there. Now, another great shortcut in Adobe products and almost across the board, if you hold down, if you have your select tool and you have something highlighted and you hit the Alt button, usually you'll see these little double arrows, and you click and you drag. That is a way to make a really fast copy. So you'll see me doing that a lot. It's much better than doing your control copy, control paste in front. Sometimes it's just easier. Hold Alt, just drag and make a copy. So this is Mr. Pibb, right? We're gonna mesh the old with the new. So click that, resize it down. We want it a little bit smaller, and let's align it to the left here. So Mr. Pibb, but we're gonna actually have Mr. Pibb extra. So let's click on our Pibb again, drag it straight down. If you double click on any of your text areas, it'll automatically bring up your cursor tool, so that's a little easier than going and selecting it. So that's a shortcut there. And let's type the word with our cap locks on, extra. So for this, we need a slightly thinner font, and there's a good one that I like to use called Acumen Pro. Acumen Pro Wide, and the type that we are looking for is light. We want it to be a nice light text. And this is a good time to remind you to save your projects. I should have done that to begin with when we opened it up. Go ahead and click it in title and save it. But let's go ahead and do save as. As you can see, mine's acting a little funky, a little funny. Sometimes that happens. Make sure you have the right file selected. We're going to call it Mr. Pibb. I have my cap locks on still, so Mr. Pibb. That's fine. We'll just call it Mr. Pibb. Click save, hit OK. That way, if anything goes wrong here, I can open it back up and start from where I am instead of starting all over. So let's go in. Let's try this again. Extra. Click back up here, and let's go select our Acumen Pro Wide, and again we're going to make it light. It does not like that for some reason. Okay. How about regular? Light italic? Sure, let's do extra light. So again, this is a font you might not have, so if you don't have it, it is an Adobe font, so go to Find More and just type in Acumen, Acumin, and you'll see there's a bunch here. So Acumen Pro, this one is Acumen Pro Wide, Light, and you can see on mine it is activated. So yes, so once you get it activated, you can move it in here. So we want this text to be smaller. And what we're going to do with this is actually stretch it out across the whole of this. And so we want the letters to be smaller, but we're going to space them out wider. Now we can do that the way I just showed you, and by character, and we can go up here and we can adjust our tracking. We can do that, but to manipulate text, generally, before a design is all the way done, you're going to need to go in and convert all of your text over to outlines so you can manipulate it. So let's do that now. If we select all of our lettering here and you right click on it, you'll see this. Also, Shift Control O is the shortcut for that. We're going to create outlines, and you can see we went from having those text boxes with the lines, and we can change the text. So at this point, once we've done this, you cannot go in and change. So if you have a typo, so in here, you cannot change it. You're going to have to go in and redo it. So I actually missed a step. What I usually like to do, just in case to be safe, is before I can create outlines, I will hold Alt and select and drag just in case. So that way, if I need to change it for any reason, I don't have to start completely over and type everything out and go select all my fonts. I'll have a copy here I can work with. That's just a nice little tip there. But let's go ahead and select those, right click and create outlines. And so now you'll see each of these are in their own grouped objects. So they are grouped together. So let's hit Control Shift or G, Control Shift G, and that's going to ungroup them. So this is another way we can space things. Let's grab our A and we'll hold Shift and click B. So we have just our A selected, and then this is still a group, so it's going to select the whole thing. Now up here at the top, make sure we're still selected to align to selection. So it's going to align based on the objects we have selected, and let's align it to horizontally to the right. And you can see it's dragged our A all the way over there. And let's do the same thing here and align that to the left. And let's go ahead and make sure, if you're not sure which one is further away, click and drag it to the right, and then select both of them, align that left, and now we know everything is aligned nice, except our problem is, of course, we have these are not spaced evenly. So down here in our as part of the Pathfinder tool, you're going to have your Align tool. So again, if you don't see it, go up in Windows and find the Align tool, and you can click it and drag it. So go ahead and select all of your letters here in the word extra, and we're going to use this distribute spacing. This is a really nice tool here. So this is going to distribute so you have even space between all of your letters. So click that and look at that. Boom, nice and easy. And it's looking pretty good, pretty neat, but I think we just need a little bit more, bring a little bit more of the old packaging in here. So we need a little bit more of this maroon color, I think. So to do that, let's go ahead and select, I think we're going to want Mr. Pibb to be maybe this nice maroon color, but we're going to do some text effects here to this. Let's go ahead and select your MR, and let's go ahead and hit Control 8 to make that a compound path. That's going to make it easier to manipulate here. So go ahead. It might take your color away. That's okay. It's no big deal. Just go back and select it to be white again. So let's select both of these and go up, and under our object menu, we're going to go down and we're going to select path, and we're going to select offset path. And you can see here, if your preview is on, what this does. And it's going to create a copy of what you have selected that is either slightly larger or slightly smaller. This is nice for a lot of reasons, because you can do a lot of really neat things with it, such as we're doing here, and making a border around them. That if you click it, if you just select it and you click and you drag, you're not going to get this nice even path that is even all the way around it. You know, it's going to be weird. So this is a nice way to do that. Let's go ahead and we're going to set our offset to 0.1, and if you deselect and select your preview again, oh, we can see that's definitely way too big. We want 0.01, excuse me. Now that, you can hardly even see it, right? So that's okay. Trust me, that's what we want for now. Let's go ahead and we're going to make that black. And so now you see we kind of have just a little bit of a separation in here. And let's go in, and you have to probably zoom in, make sure we have our new path, the black one selected, and we're going to do this again. So we're going to go to Object, and then we're going to go down to Path, and we're going to go down to Offset Path again. But this time we want it a little bigger. So let's try 0.03. What does that look like? Yeah, I think that's going to give us a nice contrast there. So hit OK. We're going to make this white. So we have a nice, so now you can see this kind of effect that we've created here. Now let's select our original Mr. Pibbs that we started with, and let's go ahead and hit Control 8 and make those one group together. They're going to be one compound path. And you can see if you click on one, they both get highlighted, so you know you did your job right. And let's go ahead and make this a gradient as well. So go over here and click in your gradient. This time let's do a linear gradient. And let's set it to minus 90 degrees. But this time, and our top one is pretty good, but let's go ahead and make this bottom one and use our eyedropper tool and select that. Click on the tie there so we get that nice real pibby looking color. That's what I'm going to call it. It's the pibby color. And that's looking pretty good. I think we're pretty much almost done with this here. Let's do one last little finishing touch. Select our Mr. Pibb layer, hit Control Copy, Control C to copy it, Control F to paste it right in front of it. And let's do something give it a little bit of texture. So go up to your swatches box over here on the right and click down here in your little library. So it's going to bring up your library. There's lots of swatches, lots of different things in here. Definitely worth going and exploring and experimenting, I would say. But let's go down here. This one says patterns, basic graphics, and do basic graphic textures. And let's go ahead. You could try some of these different ones. See which ones that you like. Let's see. You know what? I kind of like that. That says stipple fine. So that looks kind of interesting. So let's go ahead. Gives a little texture. But let's go ahead with that selected, and we're going to go up to opacity, and we're going to change the blending mode on here. And let's go ahead and set it to overlay. And so now you can see overlay is going to make it light on the light parts and dark on the dark parts, just like we talked about last time. So that's kind of nice. We have a nice little texture on there. So just kind of gives that added little oomph that we're looking for. And overall, I would say that looks pretty good. And so we're going to call our design done, but we're going to take one extra step because I want to show you guys kind of how you can use these programs together. You know, you've heard me talk about the real power is in using these programs together. So there's another file that you should have downloaded from the tutorials, and it is a Photoshop file called SodaCan. So if you go in, let's open up that SodaCan file. So this is something I downloaded online. There's lots of these types of things, and it's just this blank empty soda can. So what we're going to do is superimpose our design on here onto this can so we can actually see what this would look like if it were a real can. So this is important because you know, when you've done your work, you've created a nice design, it's really great if you're working for a client or whoever, if you can show them a really strong visual. And that's what graphic design is all about, right? Is the visuals. So make your visuals as strong as possible. So we are going to do a mock-up. So we've created our design for what we think it could look like, but now let's mock it up, actually put it onto a can. In this case, it's easier because this file is kind of pre-made and it's ready, because I didn't want this to be a difficult part for you. I just wanted it to be a part where I can show you the power of using these programs together. So what we need to do is, first of all, go back to our Illustrator file, go ahead, hit save, and then file, and we're going to export and go down to export as. Let's go ahead, export as a PNG, and click the use artboards section because we don't need all this extra stuff that we have around there. And go ahead, click export, go ahead and do it as at 300 ppi, and click OK. So now go into where you just saved your PNG, open up that Photoshop file of the can. So what we want to go down and do is select this layer that says design layer. So this is the layer we're going to put our design in on. So with that layer selected, open up your folder where you have that selected and click and drag and bring that into the file here. And as you can see, it goes right in the middle, so you can go ahead and move it down and kind of get it close. So one thing you can see is it does not exactly reach the can. There's little portions on the edge here so that it doesn't exactly fit. And the other thing is the can is rounded, of course. So, and based on the angle that we have, that's going to affect the can. Our design is going to look different, you know, if it's curved around this can. So what we want to do is we want to warp our design to the approximate shape we think it would be if it was rounded on this can. So let's go ahead, select our Mr. Pibb layer with our design on it, and we're going to go up here to Edit, and we're going to go to Transform, and we're going to go over to Warp. And so you can see what the warp is going to give us these handles that we're kind of used to seeing. We have the nodes in the corners, and then we're going to have these handles. And as we stretch these handles, we can see that it affects our image. So I'm going to Control Z back to our original. So I am going to select this corner, and I'm going to drag it in a little bit because I feel like it would be a little bit wide. And then we're going to have to drag the handles in as well. Do the same thing on this side. Drag them both in just a little bit, just so that our Mr. Pibb is not stretched so far that you can't read it. Okay, so that's pretty close. So now to adjust make it look a little more curvature, we're going to adjust the handles here. And again, we might have to take our node and we might stretch this up a little bit and do the same thing on that side, stretch that up, just so that we make sure that we're covering all the portions of this part of the can here. And we're going to just curve it, and then we're going to do the same thing at the bottom. We're going to want to curve that design downward, and perhaps we went a little too far down with our sides, so just go ahead, adjust it. A quick tip if you're not sure what you're doing is, you want to make it roughly the same shape as the can, because we're reflecting the curvature of the can. So I feel like if we're looking here, we actually need to maybe have it a little bit more curved looking, a little more warped at that section. Something close to that is going to look pretty good. Now, as you can see, it's too big. It's still laying over the can. So what we have to do, if you've probably already guessed, is we got to mask it out. So a quick way to do that is click on this layer that says Object. And then if you right click on the actual box there, you'll have an option that says Select Pixels. So we have selected those pixels. Now with those pixels selected, select our Mr. Pibb layer and go ahead and hit the Add New Layer button at the bottom, that square with the circle in it, and it'll automatically take the pixels that were selected and add that shape to our can, or to our mask, so that now we just see those layers there. Now that's not perfect because we have the top of this can, but that's okay. We know how to fix a mask. We go in and we get our paintbrush tool. We select our black tool. Let's just get real zoomed in here, and then we can just paint away along this top edge with a brush until we have painted away all of that stuff that would not be on the top of the can. And then we can go ahead and we can do the same at the bottom. Oh, I made a mistake there. So we would just, oh, I lost my paintbrush tool. So again, just start and just kind of work our way up. And just these parts of the can that would be silvery and not necessarily black. and we just keep working at it there until we get it close enough to the way that we want it and that it looks good. Now we can zoom back out, and we're almost done. But like we said, presentation is everything, and all we have right now is a can that looks like it's kind of just floating in midair. This file already has a nice shadow built in. But let's go ahead and just put some color into the background. So if you click on the shadow layer, let's go up and hit layer, and then go down to new fill layer and do gradient and hit OK. Once again, let's go ahead, if we go and open up our gradient menu here, let's bring in some of these colors. And so let's take this color and let's make it that nice maroon color from the title, and then hit OK. And our other color, let's make this lighter, because as the background will go away, we'll have a nice light color. We actually can't see that reflected because our opacity is down. So click on the upper square on the upper side, and you'll see opacity is at 0. You can click and drag that all the way up to 100. Hit OK. Once you get it the way that you like, I actually happen to think I'm going to move that down a little bit. And I think maybe that's a little dark for me, so I will do like a tad bit lighter. Okay, okay. You can see our shadow looks like it's disappeared. That's because it is below this layer, so click on our background layer we just made and drag it down below. Our shadow appears, and we have a nice sort of finished image that we would be able to show our client to say, hey, you know, this is my design, and here's what it would look like on a can. Hopefully you guys were able to follow along, and you learned a little bit about how Illustrator works, how some of the where the tools are, and how they work. And hopefully this will help you guys in your next assignment. I look forward to seeing you guys in class next week. Take care.